The mountain man had lived in the high peaks for as long as anyone in the nearby village could remember. He was a man of few words, a quiet shadow who moved through the trees like part of the forest itself. His cabin sat on a steep slope, surrounded by thick pine and oak far from the winding dirt roads that connected the village. Only a few people had ever seen him up close, and fewer still had dared to stay for more than a few hours. Most said he was impossible to live with, and the ones who tried quickly agreed. The women especially could not last. He had built his life around simplicity and hard work. Every morning, long before the sun peeked over the mountain ridges, he was already chopping firewood. His arms were strong, his hands rough and calloused, and his movements were precise. Each swing of the axe was measured, not rushed. The sound of wood splitting echoed through the valley, and he often paused just to listen to it, as if it were music only he could understand. After the firewood was stacked, he would gather water from a nearby stream, the icy flow making him shiver, though he never complained. He carried buckets up the slope to his cabin, sometimes muttering under his breath about how heavy they were, but never missing a day. His meals were simple but nourishing. He hunted small game, fished in the streams, and grew vegetables in a small patch of land cleared from the forest. He had a way with the animals he raised, treating them with respect and patience. Chickens clucked happily in their pen, and a few goats wandered near the cabin, always curious but cautious. The man enjoyed the routine of it all, the rhythm of work and the quiet of the mountains. But even in the peaceful solitude, a small part of him felt the ache of loneliness. Over the years, rumors about him had spread throughout the village. People whispered that no woman had lasted more than a week living with him. Some said it was because he was too strict, too independent, or too rough. Others believed it was because he simply had no patience for complaints or weakness. The mountain man himself never paid much attention to these stories. He did not seek attention, and he did not care what people thought. Yet deep inside he knew the truth. Loneliness could be heavy, even for someone as self-reliant as he was. Sometimes at night he would sit by the fire and stare into the flames, imagining what it would be like to share his life with someone else, not just a passing visitor, but a partner who understood him. One evening, while sharpening his hunting knife, he received a letter from the village postman. Letters were rare in those parts, as most people preferred to talk in person, but this one was different. It was an offer from a mail-order bride service, something he had always been skeptical about. He had resisted the idea for years, believing that no stranger could truly adapt to the harsh life of the mountains, but now as he sat by his small wooden table, the flickering firelight reflecting in his eyes, he felt a small spark of curiosity. Perhaps he thought it was time to give it a chance. The next morning he wrote back carefully. He did not make any promises or reveal too much about his life, but he agreed to meet the first woman who might come. He felt a mix of anticipation and apprehension. What if she could not survive a week? What if she was like all the others, easily frightened, unwilling to work, or too delicate for the mountains? He sighed and set the letter aside, knowing that soon enough the answer would arrive at his doorstep. Days passed, and the mountain man continued his routine. He chopped wood, tended to his animals, and explored the forest trails. The quiet of the mountains was comforting, yet he could not stop thinking about the woman who might come. He wondered what she would look like, how she would behave, and if she would understand the life he led. He had learned from experience that appearances could be deceiving. A woman might seem strong in a letter or a photograph, but when faced with the reality of mountain life, even the smallest challenge could become unbearable. Finally, a wagon rumbled up the narrow path that led to his cabin. Dust rose in small clouds, and the horses snorted as the driver slowed. The mountain man stepped outside, his gaze steady, waiting to see who had arrived. A young woman stepped down from the wagon, her eyes wide with curiosity and a hint of nervousness. She carried a small bag of belongings, neatly packed, and her posture was careful, almost cautious. She looked at the cabin, then at the mountain man, and smiled politely. "Hello," she said softly, her voice carrying over the crisp mountain air. "I'm here for the arrangement." He studied her carefully. She was not delicate, but she did not seem rugged either. She seemed polite, eager to please, and perhaps a little naive. He nodded, acknowledging her arrival, and stepped aside to let her enter. Inside the cabin, the air smelled of pine, smoke, and the faint scent of herbs. The woman looked around with interest, her eyes lingering on the simple furniture, the neatly stacked firewood, and the tools hanging on the walls. "Do you like it?" he asked, his voice low but not unfriendly. It's beautiful, she replied. Very different from home, but beautiful. They sat by the fire, and the mountain man asked her about herself. She spoke of her life in the village, her hopes and her willingness to adapt to his way of living. He listened carefully, noting her enthusiasm but also searching for signs of hesitation or fear. By the end of the conversation, he felt a cautious optimism. Perhaps she could last longer than the others. Perhaps. The next morning brought the first test. He handed her a small axe and asked her to split some firewood. She struggled at first, swinging awkwardly and missing the logs, but she did not give up. The mountain man watched, offering a few brief tips, his eyes sharp but patient. By the afternoon, she managed to split several logs on her own. He nodded quietly, impressed by her determination. The days that followed were filled with small challenges. She learned to fetch water from the stream, feed the animals, and cook simple meals over the fire. Some tasks frustrated her and she made mistakes, but she persisted. The mountain man remained reserved, watching her carefully, sometimes offering guidance, other times stepping back to let her figure things out. He could see that she had grit, a quality that the others had lacked. Despite her efforts, the mountain man could sense that she might not last. There were moments when she seemed overwhelmed, sweat dripping from her brow, hands blistered from work, and eyes filled with doubt. He knew that many women would have given up by now, running back to the village, declaring the mountains too harsh, the life too difficult. But she did not. Each time she stumbled, she picked herself up again, learning from her mistakes, adapting to the new environment. Even so, after only a week, it became clear that she was not meant for this life. One morning she packed her few belongings, thanked him politely, and left without complaint. The mountain man watched from the cabin door as she disappeared down the narrow trail, her figure growing smaller among the trees. He felt no anger or disappointment, only a familiar emptiness that came with another failed attempt. The mountains returned to their quiet, the firewood still stacked, the animals still grazing, but the ache of loneliness lingered. He thought about why no woman had lasted. Perhaps it was the isolation, the hard work, or his uncompromising standards. Perhaps it was the truth that living with him required more than willingness. It required a resilience few possessed, yet he did not despair entirely. Somewhere out there, he believed, there might be someone who could endure, someone who would not only survive the mountains but thrive in them, someone who would see the beauty in his way of life and embrace it as her own. For now, he returned to his routine, chopping wood and tending the animals, carrying water and preparing meals, the rhythm of mountain life continuing as it always had. He was alone again, but the hope remained. The forest was vast, the mountains high, and perhaps, just perhaps, the right person would come along to share it all with him. And so, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, the mountain man sat by his fire. He stared into the dancing flames, listening to the whisper of the wind through the trees. Loneliness was still there, yes, but so was a quiet anticipation. Life in the mountains was hard, unforgiving, and beautiful all at once. And he knew deep down that one day someone would arrive who could understand it, accept it, and maybe even stay. Until that day came, he would wait patiently and silently among the trees and the peaks he called home. After the last woman left, the mountain man returned to his life as if nothing had changed. The cabin stood firm among the trees, the firewood stacked neatly by the door, and the animals continued their quiet routines. Yet inside he felt a familiar emptiness. He kept telling himself that he did not need anyone. He had the mountains, the forest, the streams, and the endless sky. That should be enough. But as he moved through his chores, he could not ignore the echo of loneliness that lingered in the quiet air. Weeks passed, and the mountain man heard more rumors in the village. The villagers, curious and slightly amused, often whispered about his attempts to find a bride. "No one lasts with him," they said. "It is impossible." Some of the older villagers shook their heads knowingly. Some laughed when the story of the last woman leaving reached their ears. The mountain man did not care much for gossip, yet a small part of him felt a prick of disappointment. He had hoped that perhaps someone could endure, but it seemed his solitude was destined to continue. Then, a letter arrived again. Unlike the last one, this letter felt different. It was more confident, more certain. It was written by a woman who claimed she had heard about him and understood what life in the mountains demanded. She said she was strong, practical, and ready for the challenges he faced every day. He read the words twice, then folded the letter carefully. A part of him wanted to dismiss it as another hopeful but unprepared soul. Still, another part, smaller, quieter, felt a spark of curiosity. A few days later, a wagon rumbled along the narrow mountain path. The mountain man stepped outside, squinting into the sunlight. The woman who stepped down from the wagon was different from the others. She was not tall and delicate, nor did she move with hesitation. She had a quiet confidence in the way she carried herself. Her eyes, bright and observant, scanned the cabin and the forest with interest, not fear. She smiled at him politely, and for the first time he felt something unfamiliar, a cautious sense of hope. "Hello," she said clearly, her voice steady. "I think I am the one you have been waiting for." The mountain man said nothing for a moment. He studied her carefully. She did not look fragile. She did not look like someone who would give up at the first sign of hardship. Perhaps this one could be different. He gestured toward the cabin. "Come inside," he said simply. Inside, the cabin smelled of pine smoke and fresh herbs. The fire crackled softly and the small space seemed warm and inviting. The woman looked around, her eyes wide but steady. She seemed genuinely interested in the life he had built, not intimidated by its simplicity or its harshness. She set down her bag and followed him as he led her to a chair by the fire. They sat for a while exchanging small talk. She spoke of her life in the village, of work she had done that required patience and strength, and of her willingness to learn. The mountain man listened carefully, noting the ease in her speech and the lack of fear in her eyes. There was a difference here, a subtle but important difference from the others who had come before. He did not smile, nor did he show too much emotion, but inside he felt a cautious sense that this woman might last longer than any before her. The next morning was her first true test. The mountain man handed her an axe and pointed to a small pile of logs. "Split this wood," he said. She looked at the logs, then at him, and nodded. "I can do that," she said. At first her swings were awkward. She missed the logs, stumbled over the uneven ground, and her hands quickly became sore. The mountain man watched quietly, his arms crossed. He offered a few short instructions, then stepped back. She persisted, wiping sweat from her brow and taking deep breaths. Slowly the logs began to split. By the afternoon she had managed several pieces, and he nodded quietly, noting her determination. The days passed in a rhythm of work and learning. She fetched water from the stream, fed the animals, and cooked simple meals over the fire. She made mistakes, sometimes burning food, sometimes dropping tools, but she never gave up. She asked questions, listened carefully, and tried again. The mountain man observed her closely. He did not offer constant praise or encouragement, yet he could feel a growing respect for her resilience. Yet the life of the mountains was harsh. One morning, as they went to gather berries, a sudden storm rolled over the peaks. Rain fell in heavy sheets and wind whipped through the trees. The woman struggled to keep her footing on the muddy path, but she refused to retreat. The mountain man watched her, impressed by her courage. Together, they managed to reach the cabin, soaked and tired but safe. For the first time, he felt a spark of connection. She had faced danger and hardship without complaint, and he realized that this was a quality the others had never possessed. Over the next week, she continued to adapt. She learned to light fires efficiently, to clean the cabin quickly, and even to mend his worn clothes. The mountain man noticed small things, the way she moved quietly around the cabin, the careful way she handled the animals, the thoughtfulness she showed in even the simplest tasks. She did not try to change him or the life he had built. Instead, she embraced it as her own. Still, the mountain man could not fully trust his heart. He had been disappointed too many times before. Many women had come, many had left, and he had learned to expect solitude. But each day he found himself noticing her more, the way her eyes lit up when she succeeded at a task, the quiet laugh she let slip when something went wrong, the way she seemed genuinely interested in the rhythm of mountain life. He did not allow himself to hope too much, but he felt a subtle warmth that he could not deny. The villagers, too, began to talk. They noticed the wagon arriving, and whispers spread through the valley. "Maybe this one will last," they said. "She looks strong, and she seems determined." Some laughed at the idea, remembering the many who had failed. But others were quietly curious, watching to see if this woman could truly endure the mountain man's world. Inside the cabin, Life continued in its simple, challenging rhythm. She chopped wood, carried water, tended the animals, and cooked meals. The mountain man maintained his routines, teaching her when necessary, but allowing her space to learn on her own. Slowly, a sense of partnership began to form. Small gestures, a shared laugh, a quiet conversation by the fire, a moment of help during a heavy task, started to create a bond. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it was there. One evening, after a long day of work, they sat outside the cabin, watching the sun dip below the mountains. The sky was painted in shades of gold and purple, and the air smelled of pine and damp earth. For a moment, neither spoke. They simply watched, feeling the quiet peace of the mountains. "You handle this life well," the mountain man said finally. She smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "It is not easy, but I wanted to try. I think I understand why you live this way." He nodded, looking out at the horizon. He did not speak much more, but the acknowledgement in his eyes was enough. He respected her, and she had earned it through patience, effort, and courage. As days turned into weeks, the woman's confidence grew. She learned the paths in the forest, the ways to hunt small game, and the best spots to gather herbs and berries. She laughed more freely, and the mountain man, though still reserved, found himself noticing her presence in the cabin more keenly. He was used to solitude, but her companionship did not feel intrusive. It felt natural. Yet challenges remained. She still struggled with the cold, with the fatigue that came from endless chores, and with moments of doubt. There were times when she questioned whether she could endure, but each time she persisted. And each time the mountain man saw that resilience, the determination that had been missing in every woman who came before. Slowly, he began to believe that perhaps for the first time, someone might truly last in his world. The week ended with a quiet moment of reflection. She had proven herself capable, not just of surviving, but of adapting, learning, and respecting the life he had built. He did not say much, words were not his way, but inside he felt a cautious optimism. She had endured where others had failed, and a subtle shift had begun. The mountain, once a place of complete solitude, now held the presence of someone who might stay. The mountain man watched the fire crackle that evening, feeling a quiet sense of change. He had learned to expect disappointment, but now a small spark of hope had appeared. For the first time in years, he considered the possibility that he might not be alone forever. And as the wind whispered through the trees, he knew that the life of the mountains, harsh and challenging as it was, could also hold companionship, if only the right person came along. The mountain man had lived alone for years, and the quiet of the forest had become a part of him. Each sound, each smell, each movement in the trees was familiar. He had never imagined that anyone could step into this world and make it their own. But now, as he watched the woman move around the cabin, carrying firewood with steady hands, tending the animals with care, and preparing a simple meal over the fire, he realized that perhaps he had been wrong. Perhaps someone could not only survive here but belong. She had settled into a rhythm quickly. Her initial curiosity had turned into confidence. She knew which logs to chop for the fire, how to milk the goats without startling them, and where the best spots were to catch fish in the stream. She learned the sound of the wind before a storm, how to listen to the forest, and how to move quietly among the animals. Each task, no matter how small, she approached with care and determination. The mountain man noticed every detail. He did not speak much about it, but inside he felt a respect for her growing steadily. It was not just her skill that impressed him, but her attitude. She did not complain about the cold, the long hours, or the harsh life. She laughed when things went wrong, brushed off her mistakes, and tried again. When she dropped a basket of berries or burned a simple meal, she did not sulk or demand help. Instead, she learned from it, adapting quickly. The mountain man had never met anyone like this before. Others had tried and failed, leaving after a few days, their spirits broken by the demands of the mountains. But she kept going, showing a strength that was both physical and quiet, enduring yet gentle. One morning he handed her a new task. The small vegetable patch needed tending, and he wanted her to take responsibility for it. "Make it grow," he said simply. No further instructions were given. She nodded, and for the first time, the mountain man allowed himself to step back and watch. She worked carefully, pulling weeds, watering plants, and planting new seeds. Her hands were stained with soil, her sleeves rolled up, and her brow damp with sweat. Yet she moved with purpose, a calm determination in every motion. As the days passed, their partnership deepened. They worked side by side in the forest, gathering wood, repairing fences, and checking traps. Sometimes they would hunt together, moving quietly among the trees, communicating with gestures and small nods. She was patient and observant, learning the forest as he had. She did not try to force her ways or change his routines. Instead, she learned from him and added her own touch where it felt natural. The mountain man realized that this was something he had never experienced, someone who could match his pace, respect his world, and still bring her own energy into it. Evenings became a time of quiet companionship. They would sit by the fire, sometimes sharing a simple meal, sometimes just listening to the crackle of flames and the sounds of the forest. The mountain man did not often speak of his past, but slowly, she learned to read him. She noticed the way he paused when something reminded him of loneliness, or how his eyes softened when he saw her handle a task with care. She did not push for words he did not want to give. Instead, she offered small gestures of understanding, a warm cup of tea, a quiet smile, a steady presence that said she was there, no questions asked. One day, while repairing a section of the fence, a sudden storm rolled over the mountain. Rain poured down and the wind howled, shaking the trees. The mountain man quickly assessed the situation, moving efficiently to protect the animals. The woman, without hesitation, followed his lead. She lifted the goats to safety, secured the chickens, and helped him reinforce the fence. They worked together seamlessly, moving through the storm with focus and cooperation. When it was over, soaked and exhausted, they stood side by side, catching their breath. He looked at her and saw something he had not expected: calm, courage, and unwavering strength. Her presence began to change the cabin. She cleaned and organized with care, added small comforts that made the space feel warmer, and tended to the animals with gentle attention. It was not about luxury or convenience. It was about creating a home in the middle of the mountains. The mountain man noticed, though he rarely commented. He was used to solitude and simplicity, yet he began to appreciate the way she respected his life while adding her own thoughtful touches. For the first time, the cabin felt complete. It was no longer just a place to survive, it was a place to live. Over time, they began to talk more openly. She asked about his childhood, about how he had learned to live in the mountains, and about his family. He shared small pieces carefully and without haste. He had never been good at expressing feelings, but her calm presence made it easier. She listened without judgment, never pressing for more than he was willing to give. In return, she shared her own story, of her life in the village, the struggles she had faced, and the determination that had brought her to the mountains. The mountain man realized that they were learning from each other, building a connection deeper than he had ever known. There were moments of laughter, too. Sometimes a meal would burn, or a goat would escape from the pen, or they would slip on muddy paths and fall. Instead of frustration, there was shared amusement, and the sound of their laughter echoed through the forest. The mountain man had not laughed like this in years. It was not loud or forced, but quiet and genuine, born from moments of shared struggle and triumph. She also brought a different perspective to the tasks of mountain life. Where he saw a simple routine, she saw opportunities to improve efficiency. Where he accepted discomfort, she found small ways to make things easier. He was cautious at first, reluctant to change habits he had followed for decades, but slowly, he saw the wisdom in her suggestions. Together, they developed routines that respected both their strengths, blending experience with innovation. The mountain man began to recognize that this partnership was not just about surviving together, it was about thriving together. The forest, once a place of solitude, now felt alive in a new way. They would explore the trails, noticing small details together. The way the sun filtered through the leaves, the tracks of animals in the mud, the delicate flowers growing in hidden clearings. She brought a sense of wonder that the mountain man had forgotten in years of solitude. He found himself pointing out things he had never noticed before, guided by her curiosity. For the first time, the mountains felt not just like a home, but like a shared world. Yet life in the mountains was still not easy. There were days when fatigue threatened to overwhelm them, when the cold bit through their clothes, and when work seemed endless. On those days, the mountain man noticed her perseverance even more. She did not complain, did not falter, and never let the weight of the mountains defeat her spirit. Each time she rose to the challenge, and each time he felt a deep respect and quiet admiration. He began to realize that survival was not enough. To live here, one needed courage, determination, and the willingness to grow. She possessed all of these qualities. As weeks turned into months, the bond between them strengthened. It was not spoken loudly, nor was it dramatic. It was in small gestures, shared smiles, quiet conversations, and moments of understanding. The mountain man began to notice that he looked for her presence, felt relief when she was nearby, and missed her when she was out of sight. It was a feeling he had never experienced before, an attachment, a connection, a sense of companionship that went beyond necessity. The villagers began to notice the change too. Whispers circulated that perhaps this woman might finally stay, that she had the strength and determination to endure what others could not. The mountain man did not concern himself with their opinions, yet he felt a quiet satisfaction. He had always believed that no one could last in his world, but now he had found someone who could not only last but belong. One quiet evening, as the sun sank behind the peaks and the sky turned shades of orange and purple, they sat outside the cabin. The fire crackled softly and the forest was calm. She leaned back on her hand, smiling faintly, and looked at him. He did not speak at first, simply watching the flames. Then he said quietly, "You have learned the mountains well." She nodded, her smile soft. "I wanted to understand, to be part of this life. It is hard, but I feel at home here." For the mountain man, those words were more than a statement about survival. They were a quiet acknowledgement that she belonged, not just to the cabin or the work, but to his life. He had lived for years in solitude, believing that no one could endure, that no one could understand. Yet now he realized that he had been wrong. She had arrived, not to change him, but to share in what he had built, to grow alongside him, and to bring warmth and companionship where there had been only quiet. The night fell, and the fire burned low. The wind whispered through the trees, and the mountains stood tall and silent. For the first time in years, the mountain man felt a sense of peace that was more than solitude. It was the beginning of a bond, a connection that promised companionship, understanding, and perhaps something deeper still. The woman had arrived, and in her determination, courage, and quiet strength, she had begun to make the mountains a home for both of them. The mountains were never kind, and the mountain man knew that better than anyone. The seasons could change in a single day, storms could rise from nowhere, and the work of survival was never done. Even with the woman by his side, he knew that challenges were still ahead. But now he did not face them alone. Her presence had brought a new rhythm to the cabin, a shared purpose in the daily struggles, and a quiet strength that he had not realized he needed. One early morning, the wind carried a chill that cut deeper than usual. The streams were rising from recent rains, and the sky was a heavy gray. The mountain man had planned to check the traps and hunt small game, and he noticed her standing by the door, wrapped in a thick woolen shawl, ready to go with him. She did not ask if it was safe. She simply said, "I will go with you." Together they walked through the forest, boots sinking into the soft mud. The woman moved steadily, her hands firm on the hunting tools, her eyes alert to every sound. He had taught her how to track animals, read the signs of the forest, and move quietly, and she had learned quickly. The mountain man could see how much she had grown in a short time, how much she had adapted to this life that had driven others away. Suddenly, a loud crack echoed through the trees. A branch heavy with water had fallen from above. The woman jumped back instinctively, but she did not panic. The mountain man's voice was calm but firm. "Watch your footing. Keep moving." She followed his lead, steady and determined. Moments like this tested more than skill. They tested courage and composure. She passed each test, and with every success he felt a quiet admiration growing inside him. The traps were checked quickly. One had caught a rabbit and the other was empty. She learned to handle the catch without hesitation, skinning the animal carefully and cleaning it efficiently. He watched, impressed not only by her skill but by her focus. She did not shy away from what needed to be done. She accepted the reality of mountain life, harsh and demanding as it was, without complaint. Back at the cabin, chores continued. She carried water from the stream, fed the animals, and began preparing a stew over the fire. The mountain man noticed the small improvements she had made, her careful stacking of firewood, the way she organized the tools, the subtle ways she made the cabin more comfortable without changing its simplicity. Each improvement was a reminder that she was not here just to survive. She was here to be part of this life. Even with her presence, Life in the mountains was not easy. One afternoon, a sudden snowstorm hit, catching them off guard. The wind howled through the trees and snow covered the ground quickly. The mountain man and the woman worked together to secure the cabin, bringing in firewood, closing gaps in the roof, and checking on the animals. The cold was biting, but they did not falter. She moved with efficiency and calm, her energy steady even as her fingers turned red from the frost. The mountain man saw her courage clearly and felt a strange warmth. She was not afraid of the mountains. She was ready to face them head on. That evening, after the storm passed, they sat by the fire, wet clothes drying over the flames. Silence filled the cabin for a while, broken only by the crackling wood. The mountain man noticed the way she looked around the cabin, checking that everything was secure, that the animals were safe. She did not ask for his approval, but she sought to understand, to protect, and to share the responsibility. It was more than he had ever expected. "You handled the storm well," he said finally, his voice low but carrying respect. She smiled, tired, but calm. "I had good guidance," she said, "and I wanted to do it right." He nodded, though he did not elaborate. Words were not always needed. Her actions had proven more than any speech could. She had learned not just to survive, but to act with thought, courage, and determination. For the mountain man, this was a turning point. He realized that she was not just a visitor or a guest. She was becoming part of the mountains, part of his life, part of the rhythm he had built. The next few weeks were filled with small trials. One morning, a goat broke loose from the pen, running toward the forest. The woman did not panic. She ran after it, calling gently, and guided the animal back safely. Another day, a sudden flood from the stream washed away part of the garden. She worked without complaint, helping to repair the soil, replanting the vegetables, and reinforcing the banks. Each trial showed her adaptability, patience, and willingness to face difficulties without giving up. The mountain man noticed more than her skill. He noticed her determination and her ability to care. She tended to the animals with attention, prepared meals that nourished them both, and learned to move through the forest with grace. He saw that. She was not just surviving the mountains, she was thriving. Slowly, a bond grew stronger, unspoken but undeniable. It was in the way they worked together, moved together, and sometimes simply sat together in silence, each appreciating the other's presence. One afternoon, while repairing a section of the cabin roof damaged in the last storm, the mountain man slipped on the icy shingles. The woman reacted immediately, steadying him and helping him regain balance. Her hands were firm, her voice calm, and her eyes focused. It was a moment that could have been dangerous, but her quick thinking and courage prevented any harm. He looked at her, surprised by the steadiness she had developed. He had never relied on anyone like this before. "Thank you," he said quietly, a rare softness in his voice. She smiled faintly. "We look out for each other," she said. It was a simple phrase, but it carried weight. The mountain man felt a warmth he had not known in years. He had always lived alone, believing that he did not need anyone. Yet here was someone who had earned his trust, shared his struggles, and begun to fill the emptiness he had carried. Evenings continued to be quiet moments of connection. They would sit by the fire discussing small things, plans for the garden, ideas for improving the cabin, or stories from their pasts. She did not push for deeper confessions, but he found himself opening little by little, sharing memories he had kept buried. In return, she shared her own experiences, revealing her determination, struggles, and the resilience that had brought her to the mountains. These conversations built trust, respect, and a subtle sense of intimacy. Life was still demanding. The work never ended, the weather never relented, and the mountains never softened. Yet with each challenge, the mountain man noticed how their partnership strengthened. They had learned to anticipate each other's moves, to communicate without words, and to share responsibilities equally. She had become more than a helper. She had become a companion, a partner in every sense. One particularly harsh day, a small fire broke out near the cabin, sparked by a stray ember from the chimney. Flames licked at the dry underbrush and smoke filled the air. The woman did not panic. She grabbed a bucket of water, moved swiftly, and began dousing the flames while the mountain man tackled the larger parts of the fire. Together, they managed to contain it before it could spread. When the danger passed, both were exhausted, covered in soot and sweat, but safe. The mountain man looked at her and felt a surge of admiration. Her courage and calm had saved them both. The villagers continued to talk about them. Many were surprised, some skeptical, but the mountain man no longer cared about their opinions. He had witnessed her strength, her courage, and her ability to thrive where others had failed. He realized that she was not just a visitor in his life. She was part of it, someone who had earned her place through action, resilience, and determination. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. The seasons changed, and with each new challenge their bond deepened. They faced storms, harsh winters, and unexpected dangers, but they faced them together. The mountain man began to trust her in ways he had never trusted anyone. He noticed how much he relied on her presence, her judgment, and her strength. For the first time in years, he felt that he was not alone. One quiet evening, as the sun dipped behind the mountains and the forest turned gold in shadow, they sat outside the cabin. The air was crisp, the fire crackled softly, and the mountains loomed silent and eternal. The mountain man glanced at her, noticing the way she was tired yet content, the faint smile on her face, the calm confidence in her eyes. He realized that the emptiness he had carried for so long was beginning to fade. She had not just endured the mountains, she had embraced them, and in doing so she had become part of his life. "You have done well," he said quietly, his voice low but sincere. She looked at him, her expression calm but knowing. "We do this together," she replied. It was not just a statement of fact. It was an acknowledgement of partnership, of shared life, and of trust. The mountain man felt a quiet joy that he had not known in years. The mountains were still harsh, the work never ending, but now there was a companion, someone who understood, someone who shared the struggles, and someone who had earned a place in his life. The night fell, and the stars appeared scattered across the sky like distant fires. They sat together, side by side, listening to the wind in the trees and the soft sounds of the forest. For the first time, the mountain man felt that life in the mountains was not just survival, it was living with someone by his side, facing challenges, sharing laughter, and building a future together. The woman had proven herself not just by enduring, but by becoming a part of this world and of his life. And in that quiet moment, he knew that whatever the mountains brought next, they would face it together. The mountain man had never thought he would feel this way. After years of solitude, he found himself looking forward to the woman's presence, noticing her absence, and appreciating her small gestures in ways he had never imagined. The cabin, the forest, and even the harsh mountain trails had changed because she was there. It was no longer just a place to survive, it had become a home, full of shared life and quiet joy. One morning, the wind carried a gentle chill, signaling the approach of autumn. Leaves were turning golden and red, falling softly to the ground. The woman was outside gathering firewood, her movement steady and confident. He watched her for a moment, noticing how natural she had become here, how comfortable and capable she was. Her hair was tied back, her sleeves rolled up, and her boots, muddy from the forest paths, but she moved with grace and purpose. It was a sight that made him realize just how much she had grown into the mountains and into his life. The day was filled with tasks. They repaired the fence along the steep slope, checked the traps, and gathered vegetables from the small garden. The woman worked efficiently, handling each task with focus and care. He noticed how she thought ahead, planning each move, solving problems quickly, and sometimes improving on the routines he had followed for years. She had learned to live in the mountains, but she had also brought her own sense of wisdom and understanding. As they worked, they talked quietly. She asked about the forest, about the animals, and about the way he had learned to survive in this harsh world. He spoke more openly than ever before, telling her stories of his early years in the mountains, of mistakes and lessons learned, of nights spent alone by the fire. She listened patiently, never judging and occasionally of. In the afternoon, a sudden storm began to rise. Clouds darkened the sky and the wind picked up, whipping through the trees. They moved quickly to secure the cabin and tend to the animals. The woman carried buckets of water to strengthen the fire, helped the goats to shelter, and checked that the chickens were safe. Her calm efficiency impressed him. There was no panic, no hesitation, only action and determination. Together they worked as a team, their movements coordinated without the need for words. The storm passed after a few hours, leaving the forest damp and fresh. They were tired, soaked, and cold, but safe. Sitting by the fire that evening, drying their clothes and warming their hands, the mountain man noticed something he had not felt in a long time, a deep sense of relief and gratitude. He had survived the mountains alone for years, but this presence, this companionship, made everything lighter. The work was still hard, the weather still unforgiving, but it was no longer overwhelming. She had become not just a partner in labor, but a partner in life. As the weeks passed, their bond continued to deepen. They shared meals, laughter, and quiet moments by the fire. They began to anticipate each other's needs and movements. When one was tired, the other would step in without a word. When the work became difficult, they found strength in each other. Slowly, the mountain man realized that his life had changed in ways he had not expected. He had always believed that solitude was necessary, that no one could truly endure the mountains with him. Now he understood that companionship did not weaken him. It strengthened him. One morning, while checking the traps in the forest, the woman found a fawn caught in a thicket. She did not hesitate. Carefully, she freed the frightened animal, soothing it with gentle words and calm movements. The mountain man watched, quietly amazed at her compassion and skill. He had never seen someone approach a challenge like that with such care and confidence. It was moments like this that made him realize how rare and special she was. Over time, their daily life settled into a comfortable rhythm. They tended the cabin, gathered food, and explored the forest together. But it was not just routine work that mattered. It was the moments in between. Sitting quietly by the stream, watching the sun rise over the peaks, or sharing a laugh after a small mishap. These moments became the heart of their life together. The mountain man began to notice that he looked forward to these times more than anything else. One day, while preparing a simple meal, she paused and looked at him with a small, knowing smile. "You've taught me a lot," she said, "but I think I've also learned how to make this life better." He studied her for a moment. "Better?" he asked. "Yes," she said softly, "not because it needed fixing, but because we can do it together. I understand your world now, and I think we can make it stronger, safer, and even happier." He did not respond immediately. Her words were simple, yet they carried a weight he had not expected. She had not come to change him or to challenge his ways. She had come to share, to grow with him, and to add her own presence to his life. For the first time, he felt that the mountains, the cabin, and the forest were not just his domain. They were theirs. The villagers continued to talk. Whispers spread about the woman who had come and stayed, about how she had adapted to the harsh life of the mountains, and about how the mountain man, known for driving others away, had finally found someone who could endure. Some were surprised, some were skeptical, but he no longer cared. He had found something far more important than opinion. He had found companionship, trust, and partnership. The winter brought new challenges. Snow covered the peaks, and the cold penetrated even the warmest clothing. But they faced it together. The woman learned to cut ice for water, to keep the fire burning constantly, and to care for the animals through the harshest nights. The mountain man noticed her growing strength and confidence. She was not just surviving, she was thriving, and he was proud of her. In turn, she admired his resilience and the careful way he navigated the mountains. Their respect for each other deepened with every passing day. One evening, after a particularly long day of clearing snow and repairing the cabin, they sat together by the fire. The wind howled outside, but inside, the warmth of the flames and the quiet presence of each other created a sense of peace. For the first time, the mountain man allowed himself to reflect openly. He realized that he no longer feared solitude, because he had found someone who could share it with him. He no longer dreaded the challenges of the mountains because she was there, steady and strong, facing them by his side. Their connection grew in ways neither of them had expected. It was not about grand gestures or dramatic confessions. It was in the small things, passing each other tools without a word, sharing a smile when a goat escaped, laughing together at a spilled basket of vegetables. It was in the quiet understanding of each other's habits, the anticipation of needs, and the comfort of shared presence. The mountain man had always believed that no one could last here. Now he understood that it was not about endurance alone. It was about connection, trust, and shared purpose. As spring approached, bringing new growth and longer days, they began to plan for the seasons ahead. They repaired the cabin, expanded the garden, and prepared for the warmer months. She suggested new ideas for efficiency and comfort, and he realized that her presence did not diminish his independence. It enhanced it. Together they built a life that was stronger, safer, and richer than either could have managed alone. One afternoon, while walking along a forest trail, they came across a deer caught in a trap. The woman immediately knelt down, working carefully to free it. He watched her, silently proud. Her calm hands, steady movements, and patient words brought the frightened animal back to freedom. In that moment, he realized something profound. She had not only survived the mountains, but she had become part of its life, as much a part of it as he was. She belonged here, and she belonged with him. That night, they sat by the fire, watching the stars twinkle above the peaks. The mountains were quiet, the forest still, and the cabin warm. The mountain man reached for her hand, a simple gesture he had never allowed himself before. She looked at him, her eyes soft, understanding, and accepting. They sat together in silence, feeling the unspoken bond between them. Years of solitude had taught him to be cautious with his heart, but now he knew he could trust it. "You stayed," he said finally, his voice low and sincere. "I did," she replied, squeezing his hand gently. "I wanted to, and I think this is where I belong." He nodded, a quiet smile forming on his lips. The mountains had been his life for so long, harsh and unforgiving, but now they held something more. A shared life, a partner, and a sense of belonging he had never known. The woman had arrived, endured, adapted, and grown. She had not only survived the mountains, she had brought warmth, strength, and companionship into them. From that day forward, life continued with its challenges and routines, but the mountain man faced them with a sense of peace he had never known. The cabin, the forest, and the mountains were still demanding, still wild, but they were no longer faced alone. Together they worked, laughed, planned, and grew. The bond they shared was quiet but strong, built through trust, respect, and shared experiences. Years of solitude had taught the mountain man many lessons, but the greatest was this: life, no matter how harsh, could be richer and fuller when shared with someone who understood, adapted, and stayed. And in the woman's presence he finally knew the warmth, companionship, and quiet joy he had longed for. The mountains were no longer a place of solitude, they were a home, and together they had made it a place of life, love, and belonging.